Welcome to episode 117 of the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Breitman, coming to you on Friday, July 21st. Happy Friday. What a week it's been. We started the week talking about Rutgers men's basketball, potential roster additions to the transfer portal, and we're going to end the week talking about the potential additions for Rutgers men's basketball for the 23-24 season. I reported and tweeted earlier today that Oskar Palmquist is back in the transfer portal. He left the program in March and transferred to Elon in North Carolina in May. Now he's back in the portal. I do think that it's a very real possibility that Oskar Palmquist could come back to Rutgers after departing after that last season. And why not, right? In terms of a twist and an offseason full of twists. The transfer portal, NIL, just the entire climate of college basketball recruiting upside on its head this offseason. And Rutgers has kind of been the poster child to a degree, losing Cam Spencer after the undergrad one-time transfer deadline had passed. Mulcahy transferring after the NBA early withdrawal deadline had passed. And now potentially a player that left initially could return for Rutgers. There's no rule against it. In terms of eligibility, Oskar has graduated, so he's a grad transfer. He does have 2 years of eligibility left. Remember, he enrolled mid-year in that 1920 season. He redshirted. He played 3 seasons. That first season was the COVID season, 2021, where anyone that played got an exemption, free year. He's played an additional 2, so he has 2 remaining. We've spoken at length about Austin Williams and the potential there, and then Jeremiah Williams set to visit next week. So let's break it down. So Rutgers has 3 open scholarships at the moment, and now we have 3 names that are all potentially linked to Rutgers. So Austin Williams, grad transfer yet again. He transferred from Hartford to Florida International last year, suffered a knee injury, missed the entire year. He's currently taking summer classes, has to finish that up. I think there's a very strong possibility once that happens, he will ultimately end up at Rutgers. He has 1 year remaining as a grad transfer. Would need to get a waiver, being that it would be his 7th year in college. But all signs are looking good on that front. Austin Williams would be an impact guard for the program. He would play a key role. Whether he would start, come off the bench, he would be a key contributor for this team. Then you have Jeremiah Williams set to visit the program on Monday. Played at Temple for 2 years. Transferred to Iowa State last year. Missed the entire season with an Achilles rupture. He's about 10 months from his injury. Achilles ruptures are, pretty serious. Typically have a longer recovery time than ACL injuries, depending, obviously, everything, is case by case in terms of the severity. When he left Iowa State this offseason, he initially committed to Illinois, decommitted less than a month later, back on the market, has talked quite a bit in the press. Seems like he's very interested in Rutgers. The caveat with him is that he is not a graduate transfer, and he's a 2-time undergrad transfer. So what that means is, based on NCAA rules, he would have to sit out next season. He could apply for a waiver. It's possible he could get the waiver and be eligible next season. Based on what's known, I would say the situation, it's unlikely he would get the waiver. So he would, more likely than not, as of today, in terms of what I know and what's been reported, he'd probably have to sit out next season and be eligible for Rutgers. The 24-25 season, he would have 2 years of eligibility remaining. Then you have Oskar Palmquist now, back in the portal, only at Elon for a couple of months. Oskar Palmquist is a known entity to the program. He's a culture guy. He's a good fit in terms of understanding concepts, understanding how Rutgers wants to play. For a guy that played very little most of his career, I really do. I mean, part of what upsets me about Rutgers not making the NCAA tournament last year is a story like Oskar Palmquist, because his story would have been profiled and he would have been praised even more so. I say even more so. I don't think he's been praised nearly enough in terms of the job he did coming off the bench once Matt got hurt, the impact that he made. He's not a perfect player. Defensively, I do think he got better as the year went on. There's going to be some defensive matchups that are always going to be a problem for him. But he has a specific skill set that helps. He can knock down threes. He shot 36.4%, 12 of 33. Last year, he had some big threes that I think are maybe, I don't want to say forgotten about, but, he hit 3 big threes in the loss at Indiana that kept them in that game. Without him in that game, they would have lost by double digits. They almost pulled it out. They fell apart the last minute and a half. But in no small part to Oskar Palmquist having a huge game. And for a kid that barely played to go into Assembly Hall and hit those big threes, that was a statement. Obviously, at that Minnesota game before Mag went down, that was his breakout game. He had, I believe, 15 points. He was in his zone that game. The Penn State game, that comeback in Happy Valley, he hit 2 monster threes in the second half. That, again, really was a big part of that comeback. And I don't think they win without those 2 threes. He was a little inconsistent. He was a little up and down in terms of making an impact. But what I really liked about his game was that he minimized mistakes. He didn't make a lot of turnovers. He did make some defensive mistakes, but he minimized those as the season went on. I thought that Michigan Big Ten tournament game, he was very solid, just in terms of how he played overall. He was making winning plays. He wasn't making mistakes. He played confident. With him, confidence is a big factor. If he's confident on the court, it's going to help his game. So, does it make sense to bring him back? I think it does. I think the other thing I would like fans to think about is context, right? So, it'd be one thing if we're talking about all these additions in early May. We're talking about July 21st. It's almost August. Rutgers has 3 spots open. I like what they have, and we'll get into that in a minute, with the 10. But if you can add Austin Williams, who brings you a different skill set than any other guard you have in your backcourt. He's big, 6'4". He's physical. He is an aggressive attacking guard, can get to the rim off the dribble, draws contact, gets to the line at a very high rate, very efficient rate. He would be their best rebounding guard. He has a high assist rate. He would be a good culture guy. He has big game experience. Had a big game against Baylor in the NCAA tournament. That checks multiple boxes. He would be a great addition at this point. Also, a veteran, mature guy that's going to come in and he wants to win. If you can potentially add Oskar Palmquist back to the mix, a guy that knows the program like the back of his hand, the program knows him like the back of his hand, being so late in the offseason, it would be a seamless transition back in. It gives them a guy they know they can get 3-point production off the bench. He could play a role. He provides some stability at wing with Gavin and Andre. Chol takes some pressure off him in terms of how much he hasn't necessarily contribute. Maybe he still can be a big factor this season, but he's probably, of anyone on the roster, the biggest unknown, I would say, in terms of what can he give next season. You bring in Oskar, you kind of hedge that bet. If you could bring in Jeremiah Williams, even if he's not eligible to play this season, which, again, I don't think it's likely he would be. He's also recovering from injury. You have a veteran that's in your system, in your program for a year. that can be a veteran presence next season, meaning 2024, 2025, when you hope to welcome in that monster 24 class, potentially Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, top 2 recruits in the class, Lathan Somerville, Bryce Dortch, maybe Azanul, who played with Dylan Harper on Team USA at the FIBA Under-19 World Cup. Peichel and Knight were there, saw him play. Harper played with him. Smoke Williamson, assistant, has a relationship with his AAU program. That's a dream, right? If they could get him as well, he's a top 10 recruit, top power forward in the country. But even if they don't get him, the 4 that I just mentioned, Harper, Bailey, Somerville, Dortch, you're going to have JaMychal Davis as a sophomore, Gavin as a sophomore. That's a young, very, very talented young nucleus. Egbole is only, I guess would be his 3rd year in college. Derek Simpson would be his 3rd year. But overall, I've said this all offseason. If they could bring in a transfer that's got multiple years left that can be part of the program the following season when all these young bucks come in, that's a real positive. He averaged 10 points a game at Temple. He obviously had high major interest at Iowa State for a year, looking for a fresh start after being injured, not playing. Illinois, obviously interested. Not quite sure what happened there, but maybe it was assessing the fact that, hey, you know what, he's probably not going to be able to play next year. And it was kind of a mutual parting of ways. Who knows? But there's real high major interest with this guy. So if you can fill your remaining 3, and again, initially I didn't think they were going to fill all 3, but Jeremiah Williams, again, if he's unable to play this year, you have 12 spots. You're reserving that 13th spot for him. But that's 12 active guys you have to deal with, not 13. That's really Peichel's philosophy now. He doesn't want to deal with 13 active players. You disagree or not, I'm kind of in the middle on that. But I think using it on a player that you're investing in the future on makes sense. So to be able to add potentially those 3, 2 rotational guys for next season, a foundational guy for the future, veteran, I think it would be a big win. I saw some commentary online, saying if potentially if Oskar came back, well, that's not really an ad, or it's a fail on the coaching staff. I mean, again, context is everything, perspective is everything. But I listen. If Oskar did come back, I think he can play a bigger role in his career the next 2 years. I really do. I think his development, his confidence would be up. He started to really click at the end, and he was one I was a little bit surprised that he left. I thought maybe he just wanted a bigger role, wanted to be a starter somewhere, but things change too. Maybe he got there. The grass isn't always greener where you go. Rutgers, all of a sudden, the roster is completely different without Cam and Paul. It would be kind of poetic. It would be a nice story, right? As many as the portal and NIL and kind of the toxic offseason it's been at times in the college basketball, and obviously some big losses for Rutgers. It would be a nice story. It would be a nice resolution, I guess, or it's the end of Friday. I apologize. I'm not being very articulate at the moment, but it would be cool. How about we just say that? So we'll see what happens. But where there's a lot of smoke out there, just in terms of, we know Jeremiah Williams is visiting next week. We know Austin Williams. Well, I'm telling you, Rutgers is in a good place for him. And I'm telling you, Oskar Palmquist is in the portal. There's 3 open spots. There's 3 names. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure I'll have plenty more analysis if it all does happen. But last thing, just in terms of potential, if all those 3 things happen, I'm talking about a front court with Cliff, Omori, Antoine Woolfolk, Watt Mag. We'll see when he returns from his injury. But those are 3 rotational guys for sure. Emmanuel Egbole will have an opportunity. Wings, you got Gavin Griffiths, Andre Hyatt, potentially Oskar. And then the guards, you have Noah Fernandez, who gives them a completely different element. I talked about that. Craftiness, is going to be the point guard. He's going to bring an element that Rutgers hasn't had. Derek Simpson, potentially Austin Williams, and Jermichael Davis. Reports out of camp. He's really athletic, really fast, has integrated really well with the program, and they're really pleased with how he's looking so far. So Jeremiah Williams again probably sit out, but top to bottom, I think it looks like a deeper team. I think it looks like a more versatile team. Like I said, John Rothstein had them 7th in his power rankings this week, and that's before the potential additions of Austin Williams and Oskar Palmquist. So this is going to be, if it all comes to fruition and they fill out the roster the way we just discussed, it's going to be a solid team. It's going to be a team in the mix for the NCAA tournament. And I really think that, and I'll save my flowers for if it happens, but I think it would be a heck of a job by the coaching staff and Steve Peichel to make that happen with all the adversity they've dealt with saving certain guys on the roster that, aren't even fully out there in terms of what could have been. It would be a win. It would be a win, and I would feel pretty good about the roster going into the season. So thank you for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful. Check out thescarletfaithful.com all weekend. I'll have new content there. Appreciate everyone listening and watching once again. Have a great weekend.